Wow, thanks a lot for all these comments. It really motivates me to do better and create content like this that you are enjoying. So today, again, continuing the things from our last video, we are going to go on learning about another important topic from Next.js. It's called middleware. Middleware sounds a bit complex, but it is not that complex once you understand and start knowing how to code a middleware that actually solve a problem that you are having in your hand. It has multiple use cases. We'll be talking about those use cases. However, we'll be building maybe one among them. And what I'm going to do is to continue the same project that we have started. A few videos back, we introduced nextauth, and I'm going to introduce middleware on top of that. That's the way we'll be continuing this project in the future Next.js videos as well. So at the end of it, you will feel like you have everything: authentication, middleware, internationalization, all possible things in one project that you may need for your production kind of project as well. So without any further delay, let us get started with understanding middleware, what it is, and then with our project coding to build something useful and cool. Let's get started. To start talking about middleware, let us understand what it is. In the regular scenario, in any day, you will have a client and you will have a server. Server serve the data, client do something with the data. Either it displays or do functionalities on the data that your user is looking for. So client makes a request to the server, and once the server is done with whatever the request has come, the server gets back with a response. The response could be a success response with the response data, or the response could be an error code or an error that something wrong happened in the server. It can be anything. Now this request response thing is quite straightforward. That client is making, server is listening, server is getting, pushing it back to client, right? But at times you may need something, right? That the way you are requesting thing from the server, from the client requesting things to the server, you want to do something in between. It is not like that if the request comes out of the client and it is reaching to the server in the middle, you don't have any option to do anything. Rather, how beautiful it would be if you have a way to somehow intercept your request and then do something over here and then continue the request to the server. Same way, when server is sending a response back to the client, how about a way where you can intercept the response somewhere and then do something to that particular response and then send it back to the client? So in this way, you are adding one more power, you are adding one more capability to look into the request and then somehow to manipulate that or somehow to make certain decisions and then make it proceeded to the server. Same thing is for the response as well. The thing, the part or the logic that is responsible for this kind of interception of your request or the response to do something special in between your request and response is called middleware. The term middleware is not Next.js specific. The term middleware exists even before that. So in Next.js, the concept remains same. Whenever we are going from one route to another route, whenever there is a request, whenever there are certain things happening from the API side of it, in every cases we will be able to intercept means we will be able to getting inside, and then we'll be able to put certain decisions, certain logic, certain algorithm or something that we want as our use case solving process, right? One classic example could be like you want to access a resource in your application, and accessing that resource demands that on the request to access that resource, you must have a header called authorization header, and the authorization header must have a value which signifies a token. Now, to do this for every request from your client side, writing a code like that, either you need a third-party tool so that it will do it on your every fetch request, every post call, every put call, delete call, etc. Or you do something in the middleware where you can intercept all meaningful requests that you know must have that authorization header, and you set that authorization header. One classic example. Another example could be some of the routes or some of the URLs you want to protect. You don't want end user to access them without an authentication or authorization process being successful. So in that cases, if you can determine the person or the user who is accessing a particular resource, URL or the route, if not authorized, you can actually throw them an error or take them back to the login screen so that they get that opportunity to log in and then try to access the same route, right? So doing all these things in multiple places in your application, doing it in a single place, centralized way, is what Next.js middleware provides the capability for. So today, let us get started with a project to understand Next.js middleware even better. And in that project, we are going to continue whatever we have done in the last video, where we had integrated nextauth version 5 credential provider with Next.js, MongoDB and all. And I got a lot of good feedback from that video that you guys had liked it. So thank you very much. If you're coming to this video straight without going through any of the previous videos, no worries at all. You can still continue with it. I will explain the code that is put out till now in the repository, and we'll start the middleware code from there. Okay, so let's get to VS Code and start doing stuff. So here I got the same app, in a sense that same authentication mechanism with nextauth and the credential provider, but I have changed the complete app a bit. I have got multiple routes here so that I can showcase certain examples with middleware. So let me explain like what exactly this app look like, and let me take you through the code changes that I have made so far. So far, all the code changes are made are only Next.js specific, and if you're following this series, if you have done the projects like lit loop before, you already know what are the static route, dynamic route, page, layout, etc. There's nothing new, it should be. Now, on top of this, we'll be introducing middleware. And not only that, we'll be introducing middleware in a way that whenever you have an occasion where you are interacting with a third-party database like MongoDB, PostgreSQL, and things like that, you have to consider a few things specially in your middleware. So we'll be covering all those. Those code are not done yet. We are going to code it together. But so far, a very basic Next.js application is called a product app. And let's see what exactly it does. So right now, I have not logged in into this app. So I'm going to click on this login, which is there in the navigation. So once I click on this login, this is the page you must know. You have seen this for last few videos where we have built the social login, credential based authentication, the registration, all these aspects, right? So I'm going to use the same thing, exactly same thing. And I'm going to log in now with my credential called atapas@email.com, the user that we had created last time, and giving the password. And I'm going to do a credential based login. As I've logged in, you're able to see that I have a few products listed over here. I have a watch, a cucumber, and a laptop. And you also see what happened to the URL. The URL says it is /products. That's the URL we are in. Now, if I click on any of this product, it will go to another page where I'll see this laptop. I'll see some description and the details about this laptop and a button called buy it. Here, if you see the URL has changed. It says product / the product ID 1, 2, 3, 4, some product ID, right? Now, this is how the URLs are stitched. Now what happens if I click on buy it? If I click on buy it, it goes to another page which is called checkout. And here I want you to focus on the URL that we have. Before it was products, then it was product / product ID, and now it is product / product ID / checkout. It makes sense, right? That we're designing our URL route, because you have the product list on /products. You have a single product details on /product / ID, and you want to check out and buy that particular product. So we have /checkout as well. So this is the page, and along with that, there is one more page. If you click on this particular user icon, you see this user icon because for atapas@email.com, there is no icon in the database. So it's defaulting to a particular icon that I have. Had I logged in with Google or GitHub, I would have got the image or the DP I have set up in my Google and the GitHub account. Okay. So that is also done in this particular app. And we're going to go through the code, right now to understand it at a high level. So if I click on this, it goes to another page. It's called dashboard page. The dashboard page is meant to be only for admin. So it means if an admin logs in and admin clicks on this, then only we are supposed to go to this particular page. Otherwise, we are not going to go to this page. We'll be again going back to maybe a user profile page or maybe the products page somewhere else, right? So that's the idea that I have at this point. So this is what the app is about. Let's quickly take a look into the code and the distribution of the projects and the folder and the page and the layout.js files, so that we understand what exactly we are going to deal with. And on top of this, when we are bringing in middleware, we will see that how each of these things are stitched to middleware finally. All right, so we'll go back to our code And over here, as usual, I have a src directory. Inside that I have my app. You should be familiar with the structure like this if you are following this series, or if you have learned Next.js from anywhere. You know that how the pages are created. Under app folder, if you create a folder, and if that particular folder is having a page.jsx or page.js or page.tsx file, that means that particular folder signifies and creates a route, and the page.js, ts, jsx, tsx under that will create the page for it, the page content for it. So similarly, I have a login page. You can see that it's under login. I have a products page. We had created this register page before in the previous video itself, and I have a dashboard page. Let me start with dashboard page. In the dashboard page, it has nothing but a particular div called dashboard page. That's it. That's what you're seeing on your screen as well. Similarly to the login page, the login thing, that whatever we had created in the login form, what I did, I just imported this login from over here. Whatever was there in our page.jsx file or js file in the last video, I pulled everything and create a new route called login, and I have put page.js file inside that. And I have put the content of the login form and everything inside that, so that it signifies a login. That's all. Then I have a products page. The products page has a page.js file which has a product list component. The one, if I click on this and click on all products, I have this product list. The product list shows the product image and a product name, right? So if I go inside product list, it gets all the products from somewhere, we'll see from where, and then it just print out the product image and the product name. And each of this row is also linked to a particular product with product/product ID. We can see that. How do we get all these products? I have a local JSON file, nothing really rocket science, which is having certain data like it is watch, image is just an emoji, and a few such products. You can keep adding how many products you want over here. Now in the product list, we are looping through this and we are creating each of this row, and clicking on each of this row, we are dynamically going to product/product ID. As we are dynamically going to product/product ID, so it means that inside products, I should have a dynamic ID, which is like this ID, and inside that I have a page.js file. So if I go to that page.js file, I can see that I am getting an ID, the product's ID as the parameter. I'm taking that out. I'm calling another function called get product by ID, passing that ID, which is actually going to the same file, looping through this particular array, matching the ID I am passing and returning back the product if it finds. So that comes back as a product over here, and from there I'm just showing the same image, same name, but one extra thing is called details. That's it. And below that I'm showing another link called buy it, the one that you see over here. And if I click on it, I'm going to another route called /checkout, which you see over here, product/product ID/checkout. So it means inside product ID, the dynamic route, I will have one more route called checkout. So if I go to that, I see one more route called checkout. If I expand, I'll find another page.js which says checkout page. If I click on this, it says checkout page. This is how the hierarchy of it. And the last thing that remains is under src, under app, we have the main page.js file. In the main page.js file, our landing page, basically, we see this big link over here. This is this all products, which is linked to /products. That's it. And in our layout, in the layout.js file, we have something called a navbar. This is what you see, a navbar. This is the navbar over here. In the navbar, again, if you're following the last video, we have already showed it to you. Like after login, I want to show the logged in user's name, email address, and their image, and then want to show a logout button. Exactly the same thing I'm doing in the navbar. I'm getting the session from auth. We know what auth is. We know it comes from nextauth. And then I'm getting the logged in user. I'm getting the username. If the username is there, I'm showing, the dashboard icon, basically this particular username's image. If the image is not available, I'm showing a dummy image called circle user round that I'm taking from the Lucid React library, which gives a lot of images for free. So I'm using those icons. And then otherwise, if the login is not done, in that case, I'm showing a login and register so that user can log in. In the login mode, I am also having a logout, exactly the same component we have used in the last video, so that I can click on it and I can go to the login mode directly. And again, if I press on login, I'll get back to my login screen again to start logging in. So this is what the app is and the structure is. The code is already there in the GitHub, and the source code link is in the description of this video. So we are good with this. Now we are going to introduce things called middleware, and let's start learning how middleware can come into the picture and what it is going to do. So what middleware is going to do over here? We are going to see a few use cases. One use case is we want to create protected route. Protected route means what? We want to protect few routes from publicly being accessible. What are those routes? One route that I can think of is called that /checkout. Whenever somebody going to /checkout, like from the product details page to the checkout page, they have to log in. Let's consider that as a use case. So if that has to happen, can I control that with middleware? First use case. Second use case is the dashboard. Nobody should access dashboard without any authentication. So if you are authenticated, you will be able to get to dashboard. If you're not authenticated, you won't be getting it to the dashboard. Somebody should push you back to the login screen again. Second use case. Third use case, only the admin can access the dashboard, even if you're authenticated. Even in that case, we should have some kind of check that only administrator can access the dashboard. That's the third use case. Fourth and final use case, we will have API route. Now, how can I protect an API route? Is there a possibility of doing it through APIs, or we should be doing it through some other means? Why other means? What are the factors? Those are the things also we'll learn. So these 3-4 use cases that we'll be learning in this video. In future videos, we'll be touch base with middleware again when we'll be talking about localization, internationalization, all those stuff, right? So let's create a middleware. Creating a middleware is actually a simpler thing. You can go to your project root folder. If you're using SRC, go to SRC, or if you're not using SRC, you can create a particular file called middleware.js or middleware.ts, depending on whether you're using TypeScript or not. In our case, we are not using TypeScript, we are using JavaScript. So we can create this file inside SRC if we are using SRC. If you're not using SRC, then keep this file in the same level of your app folder. Now, what exactly should go inside middleware? Middleware, at the end of the day, is a plain JavaScript function or a TypeScript function. Now, if you are using the default export to export that function, you can give any name to your function. But if you are not using default export, so in that case, you must give the function name as middleware. So I'll be doing things with named export. And that's the reason, let me create a function called export function middleware. It takes request object as an argument so that we can do something with the request object. And then after doing something with the request object, if I am keen to change the response or I'm keen to do anything to send the response, for that I need next response to be imported. So I have imported next response from next server, and this is taking this particular request. Now hold on. When this middleware is going to run, how frequently it is going to run? By default, middleware is going to run for every request that your Next.js application is making. For every page change, whenever there is a request coming, this middleware is going to run. Now, if this middleware is going to run for every request, do you really need this middleware? You don't need an empty middleware at all. If you need a middleware, you must have some logic or the use case or certain decisions to make within the middleware itself. For example, if you are coming to dashboard like /dashboard route, and if I find that you are not logged in, I'm going to redirect you to /login. So it means the redirection is the decision that I'm making within the middleware, and that's the use case I want to handle using middleware. So let's take a redirection case straight away. Return, I have this next response, and the next response has a method called redirect. And inside this redirect, you can tell on which URL you want to redirect to. And for that, you have to form a URL using the JavaScript URL object that takes two parameters. One is mandatory, another is optional. The mandatory parameter is onto which URL fragment you want to redirect to, or onto which URL you want to redirect to. So if I'm starting with / and I'm giving a relative URL path, say products/1/checkout, is the URL where I want to redirect to in some condition, and then I am going to give a particular base URL. Base URL means for our application the base URL will be http localhost 3000 / right. So then that enter URL will be http localhost 3000 /products/1/checkout. And how do we get the base URL? We get it from the request object again, where you can do request.url straight away. All right. So this particular piece of code, what is going to do, for every request it comes here, it's gonna redirect to product/1/checkout. But a code like this, will it help? Can we see? Now I'm going to refresh this. It actually crashed. Let me add a console.log over here for you, console.log, and I'm adding this particular text called middleware. Okay. Now I'm going to go back to my server, restart it with yarn dev and starting, and I'm going to do a refresh. You see what happened? The middleware, this particular text, I'm going to see every time, look like it's kind of infinite loop, and the application is not able to come out of the infinite loop and it is getting into this particular state. But let's understand, why am I going into this infinite loop if I am using middleware? It's because middleware is being invoked for every incoming request. So let's say I am going to localhost 3000 slash. The moment I go to localhost 3000 slash, I will see a code like, okay, redirect to localhost 3000 slash to localhost 3000 slash product slash one slash checkout. Fair enough. First redirection will happen successfully. Now that also a request. Again middleware will be called. Again it will come to go to product/1 plus checkout. Again middleware will be called. Again middleware will call. So middleware will be keep calling, keep calling, keep calling, and that will create an infinite loop. So having just a middleware and putting some of this code just inside that is not going to help you with anything. So you must have an exit criteria from your middleware. You have to write an exit criteria. One exit criteria could be using something called a matcher. So along with exporting a middleware from your middleware file, you can also export something called a matcher. What is a matcher? It's a configuration that you tell to your middleware saying that, hey middleware, do this, whatever is written inside your function, only if your URL matches this particular URL pattern. In that case, only when you are going to a particular pattern, then only that redirection is happening. The redirection is never going to take place if you go any other corner of your application. How do you do that? Let's write that. So do export const config. This is the config object. And inside this config object, I'm going to write a matcher. And in this case, let's do a matcher called /products. Okay, this is my matcher. So what I'm saying that among all the requests that you are serving, if any of the pattern matches this /products, only in that case, you redirect to /products/1/checkout. For any other URL, please ignore this redirection. You're getting? This is what we're saying. Now I'm going to refresh and going to localhost 3000 first. My app is back. Now what I'm going to do, I'm going to go to /products. Please guys see the URL. The moment I am going to go to /products, because if I click on it, I showed that we're going to go to /products. Now it will be redirect to /products/1/checkout automatically. It won't go to the product list page at all. It's gone to the checkout page straight away without going to the product list page because I have given this redirection. So our middleware is working. You can do a lot of stuff with this matcher. You can give a particular static path over here, or you can give multiple paths. For example, whenever I go to /products or whenever I go to /dashboard, in both these occasions, you are actually doing a matcher to this. So it means if I go to /dashboard, it's again supposed to go to this particular checkout page. It doesn't make sense, but for our example, maybe see, it's going to the checkout page again, right? You can also do things like, in case you don't want to do this, but you want to satisfy a particular URL pattern, you can also do that. That means you can do something like /:path*. That means anything that comes under products, you do this redirection. But what will happen if I do this case? Again, it will go to the infinite loop, because what I'm saying, for /products/anything, you go to /products/1/checkout. So it will go to /products/1/checkout. Again, it will match because the matching is /products/1/checkout. This will match this particular fragment. So again, it will go. Again, it will go to redirection. Again, it will match. So again, it will go to the infinite loop. If you want to see, if I go to localhost 3000, the moment I click on it, it's gonna crash. I'm going to bring this out here and I'm going to click on this guy. See, it crashed and I got this infinite loop again. So this is to tell so that you be cognizant about what is middleware, how to use, and you need an exit criteria. All right, so we have seen it for pages. Can it happen for the APIs as well, for the route handlers? Yes, something similar can happen. So here I have a route handler, and I've created this route handler called me under API. So it means whenever I do /API/me, I should get this particular response back. /me, I see, hey, that's me. Okay, this is what it gives me. Now I want to do certain redirection whenever somebody hit this API. Can it happen? Yeah, it can happen. If I go over here, let's say I am going to go to /always if the matcher is /API/path. So it means if I am going to go to /API/any path/path star you have to do, in that case I'm redirecting to /. If I want to be very specific that for this API alone I want to do, I can write /API/me. So now what will happen if I refresh this? I go back to /, which is the home page of my application. So even for the API route also this redirection is possible. That's what I wanted to show you. Another factor about middleware. Now let's the fun begin. Let us try using the auth module that we have created. Remember the auth.js file through which we used to get the auth object, and through auth we used to know like whether there is a user in the session, if the user in the session was the user's full name, their email address, if they have images, all this information. And if the user is not in the session, we used to get undefined so that we can actually manage like whether user is in the session or who is in the session, the authentication part of it. Now, how about we are bringing in the case like we'll be checking whether the user is authenticated or not through middleware, and then we'll be taking certain action. So for example, I can always tell that I can create a bunch of protected route or the private route, and without authentication, I don't want to allow access of any of those route. You must authenticate. So for that, I need to get the auth object over here, right? In the last video, we have seen that using the auth object, we were enabling login, logout. Same thing we can do over here, right? So I can, that means import auth from my auth. And once I import auth from my auth, I can pretty well can come here and call the auth function and get the session. Now, one beauty of middleware is it can be an async function. Okay, so that you can make asynchronous call within it. So to make it an async function, I can use the keyword called async. And over here, as I have done very innocently last time, I am going to write this particular line called session equals to await auth, and that's it. And then I'm going to wait and see like what exactly happened, right? And here remaining code remains same. I'm not going to change anything at all. I'm going to see whether this really run or not, and I'm going to do console.log of session. All right, so the code is very simple. If I am going to go to /API/me, is going to redirect me to /, but in the meantime it is going to tell me if I'm logged in, I'm in the session or not. All right, so let's see what happened over here. So I'm going to go and say /API/me. I get an error. So I told innocently because I pretended that it will work, but it's not working. And the error that I get, it says, cannot read properties of undefined reading user. What is this? What is user? If you're following the video of my friend again, the user is the model that we had created last time to interact with the MongoDB. You remember? So we have a user model, and this is what the user is, and this is where I get the error saying I cannot read it. It is because the middleware is being bootstrapped much before this model, this schema, everything gets assigned. So when middleware is getting ready, by that time your user model is not ready, is not loaded, and you are really not getting things over here. So if you want to access your any of those Mongo models from here, you are failing to do that. Now the question, big question, if you fail to access any of those Mongo model, how are you going to authenticate? Because your all the users are stored in the MongoDB, and you have a nextauth on top of it through which you are dealing with the user from database and doing all the circuits to find out the user is in authenticated form or not through nextauth. Now, if I cannot access the model, I cannot access database, so I cannot do the login at all. Now, in this kind of scenario, how do you handle? That's what we are going to do. This auth is coming from auth.js file. The auth.js file is having all the things about your model and all, especially the user. If your user model is not here, you are actually looking to your local data store like a JSON file to retrieve this user object, you won't get this error. As it is coming from the Mongo, it has a notion of MongoDB. It is not able to find it through the middleware. Now, especially to get the auth instance, your middleware doesn't have to be aware of Mongo at all. Your middleware has to be aware of nextauth, because we have learned Mongo is not the place where authorization is happening, authentication is happening. Is a nextauth, that's the place where authentication and the authorization is happening. So it means if I can split this auth.js file into two different purposes, one purpose gives me the next-auth object to get the authentication and the auth object, and another completely deal with all this MongoDB, getting the user back, comparing the credentials, password, and saying the user is authenticated or not. So these two purposes, if I can split out, and the place where I'm not using anything from Mongo, I'm purely using thing from nextauth. If I pass that to middleware, then middleware will be able to instantiate nextauth and get the auth object quite easily, isn't it? So that's the purpose that we're going to do now. We are going to split this auth.js file into two files. One called auth.js itself, the current file, and another one we'll call as auth config.js file. In the auth config.js file, we are going to use nextauth stuff pure, and auth.js file where remaining all these things without any change will stay. So how are you going to do that? In SRC, like where your auth.js file is, exactly there, right click and create a new file called auth.config.js. What are you going to have in this file? Very simple stuff. We are going to create a very simple configuration called export const auth config equals to, and over here only thing in the auth.js that you need, because you're doing a credential provider based authentication, so this session is pretty important. The moment I talk about the credential provider, I think there should be a problem, because here again user model and all this thing will come. But for nextauth configuration to get started, the mandatory thing is required for credential provider is this session. So what I can do, I can put the session object from here. I can put the session object over here, and I can also tell that in the auth configuration file, the one that is required minimally for middleware to get the auth, it doesn't have any provider as such. Okay, let me format this file for you. Yes, so auth config is only this much. Auth config, the session says strategy JWT and provider is blank. Now instead of getting the auth from auth.js, if I can use this auth config to get an auth, that will be great. Now look over here, how we used to get this auth object, my friend, in auth.js file. We had something called nextauth. Inside nextauth, we used to pass a configuration parameter, which is again auth configuration parameter, and that gives me an auth object. So instead of this big configuration parameter where all the providers and everything is there, now I have a tiny configuration only with session and empty provider. If I can pass this into nextauth, is going to return me the same auth, isn't it? So in my middleware, now I can use this auth config.js file, get the auth config, pass it to this next-auth constructor, and pass this particular configuration object. So this is going to return me all these factors, isn't it? At least the auth I'll get. Great. So now I'm going to do that. But before that, as I have taken this session thing out, I can actually remove it from here. Instead of that, I can import auth config, and then I'll use auth config over here. Okay, so what I'm doing over here, auth config destructuring and using means this particular auth config will be destructured. So that means this session will come and sit over here. This provider will be updated with this new providers list. That's how object works. Like that's how object destructuring work. If you're new to object destructuring, I have a video explaining 6 critical use cases of object destructuring. Please take a look. The description has the video link. You can take it out and check it. We are good actually. We have a authconfig.js file, and along with that we have a auth.js file where we have imported this auth config, and then we have used the remaining portion of it over here. That's it, right? This is what it is. Now we are going to go back to our middleware. First, I'm going to get rid of this error. I don't want you to be scared for this. So I'm going to knock out this console output. All right. Sometimes it's scary, you know. Now let's go to middleware. In middleware, instead of taking the auth from auth.js, we're going to remove this. We'll be importing a few things. Let us first import auth config, and then let us import next-auth from next-auth, and then I can now get the auth object like how I explained before, equals to next-auth, and pass my auth config. That's it. I got my auth. See, everything is working at the right side. So this means this way of getting auth doesn't have anything about MongoDB, doesn't have anything about MongoDB model or as such anything. It has a pure information about the authorization using nextauth. So now I refresh this one and I'll go to the terminal and it says undefined because I am not logged in. So my auth information over here is not there, the session information. Now let me log in and let's see if the session information changes or not. I log in with the credential again, tapas@email.com, my password, do a credential login. So I logged in now. If I go to the command prompt or the terminal, do I see that? I have this name, email that's got printed. I have that entire stuff for my session, right? Whatever is coming from the DB. I have this complete object. I have my name, the password, encrypted password, the email. I have also added a role in my DB is called admin. I get everything through auth now. I don't have to really query MongoDB at all in my middleware as such. So this portion is done. Now, as I have this information of session, I can do whatever I want. I can do a logic like I have a bunch of protected route, and if I am not logged in, I am not going to allow you to do that. If I am logged in, then only I'm allowing you to do that. All those kind of things that I'm going to do. So in our this tiny whiny application, we can define some routes as public routes, some routes as protected routes. So if we think about the case like if we know that what are those public routes, we can consider remaining all the routes are private or the protected routes. Okay. So in our application, login and register has to be the public routes. As such, the login and registration page anybody should access without being authenticated, right? There is no point of asking for authentication to authenticate, right? And another page that we can think of keeping it open is called /products, because when somebody is coming to your application, you don't want to really harass them by logging in to see the product offering you're having. You want them to throw the product offering in front of them, and if they want to buy it that point in time, you actually ask them to log in. So basically the products page, and also if you go to any of this product, the product details page should be public routes. So let's create a file where we can actually keep some of these route definitions, like what are the public routes, what is the private routes, maybe what is the login route, what is the root route, so that we can use those definition into our middleware along with the auth thing that we have established just now, to play around with it and really establish a protected routing mechanism. Yeah, this is where I love building incrementally. So in the last video, we had something called mongo.js inside lib. Now in this video, I'm going to use another file, going to create another file called routes.js. And inside this routes.js file, I'm going to define a bunch of route definitions. First route definition, these are all constants. Okay, export const login is of course /login. Similarly, export const my root is definitely /. Then I can say export const public routes equals to, I can define what are the public routes. Login is a public route. Then /register is a public route. And we said also /products. This is also a public route. So these are all public routes. Now I know the definitions. Let us go to middleware. And over here, now I can start writing my logic, the required logic to safeguard few things. So it means now I can look into the routes from my middleware, and whatever defined in the public routes and the route, everything else is the private route. So it means if I want to go to /dashboard, /dashboard is not defined anywhere here, or neither it's a root route. I am going to consider that as a private route. So here in our middleware, now we can start writing certain logic. First thing first, import all the routes that we have created from the lib routes, public routes, login, route, because we need them. Okay. Now after this, we have this request. We were doing request.url so far. We can continue to do request.url, but inside request, you have something called next URL. Next has the wrapper on top of the HTTP request on top of the URL to provide you with certain extra configuration. So you can actually use that. So to get next URL, you have to do request. You can do request.next URL, or you are actually destructuring next URL from request. Okay. I already have sessions. I have printed them here already. And then this redirection, I am going to get rid of for a moment. Rather, I am going to check certain logic. I am going to tell const is authenticated equals to, if I have the session, and inside session if I have user. So if I say session, inside that if I have user, session I got from this await auth, and I will use toNegate operator. If it is turning true, that means I am authenticated. Okay. Now again, if you're wondering what is this operator or using it for the first time, I have a video created explaining this operator, explaining that double question mark, which is called nullish operator, and then the optional chaining and all these things. You can take a look into that video that explains things quite deep about all this operator. Now I have this. Great. Let me print both is authenticated and the thing that we are going to use from next URL. From next URL, we are going to use something called path name, which is again eventually giving me the URL, the request.url we were getting. So I have given a console.log is authenticated and the next URL dot path name. I want to just make use of it and see like what exactly it prints in the console before we start writing any logic for things, right? Now, for a moment, if I don't do anything over here, let it be like this. I just refresh, go to over here. Now let's test it out. To test it out, our matcher function says /API/path, which you can see over here. Now I am going to go to /API/path and see like this particular middleware gets triggered and what exactly is going to print /API/me. So I see it over here. It says true, means I am authenticated already. And it says the path is /API/me. So it's working. As I've taken out the redirect from the middleware, it's not redirecting anywhere, but I can manually go, right? I can manually come over here. I can really see that I'm logged in. So now I will log out, and here I'm going to do the /API/me again so that my middleware gets kicked off because of this config, and then I'm going to go back to my terminal and I'm expecting is authenticated to be false. So my authentication logic is working in the middleware as well. Excellent. So now I'll proceed with my rest of the code. What I'm going to do, I'm going to identify that everything that is coming in as the URL, are those part of the public route or not? If those are not part of public route, I'm not going to allow you to go to any of those pages. I'm going to ask you to log in, right? So here my logic would be const is public route, and here I can check. I have a public routes array that I have imported at the top. I can go for a find. Find method will find something based on a condition, and we will tally it, we'll match it on the each element of the array. So from here, I'll be taking out each element of the array, that is route. And what I'll be checking is whether next dot path name, which we saw was printing sometime back, is starts with any of those route. Make sense? So it means that if the public routes has something called /products, so /products will be the route, and I'm checking if the next URL.path name means whatever the path I'm going to, whether it starts with that particular public route accepted path fragment or not. If /products is there in my route, that means this particular thing will be considered as a public route. If /products/1 is there, which is like products details, then also it should be considered as a public route, right? Because it starts with /products. And then additionally, I can put another check over here saying that if the next URL.path name along with it, or next URL.path name, if it is root, means my slash, because my landing page also I want to make it as a public route. Great. So now I'll be printing this public route also. Console.log is public route so that I can debug it in case something happen. And then finally, my final logic will be if I am not authenticated. So not of is authenticated, and it is also not a public route. Is not a public route. In this case, now my business logic. Please return response. I have this next response dot redirect. And where am I going to redirect to? I am going to redirect to login, right? So I'll be saying new URL, again the URL object. The fragment I have given already and imported over here called login, and the base URL will be my next URL. Great. So let's understand this logic once more. The logic is pretty simple. For every request that is coming over here, I am going to check whether I'm authenticated or not. If I'm authenticated, I'm going to check the route that is coming over here, whether it's a public route or not. The condition for this thing to be a public route, the start of the route has to match any of these things that I've given in the public route. Whether it has to be login or register or start with products. I'll give a slash over here. Okay. If it is not happening, any of this, in that case, I'm going to reject it, saying it's a private route and we need a login. Along with that, I'm also putting is authenticated as an additional flag that if you are not authenticated, in that case as well, you are supposed to go back to login. Okay, so this is my middleware logic, nothing beyond that. Now being here, I want to look into the matcher. So here, what is this matcher talking about? The matcher is saying that /API/path. That means it will trigger only if I go to /API/path. Only in that case, this particular logic will trigger. But I want this logic to trigger for everything. So then in that case, I don't need this matcher. But again, I don't want this logic to trigger for certain specific resources that Next.js provide. For example, the images or the .next folder or maybe the /API itself, right? I don't want, or you may have some TRPC. You don't want for those things, this particular things to be called. Apart from that, for all other occasions, you want this middleware to be called. So in that case, I can define my matcher in such a way that is possible to do with regular expression as well. Using regular expression, you can define like, please apply this middleware everywhere except certain things. Something like this is there in the documentation as well. Here I am saying that apply everywhere other than the .next, and every other occurrences that I am actually given over here. So this matcher, this config matcher, if I am putting, and now it's time that I start testing it out. I don't have to go to /API/me anymore. Rather, I can come to localhost 3000 straight away. From here, let me go to /dashboard because I know that dashboard is on /dashboard. And when I go, it automatically comes to login. So even if I know the URL, even if your URL is known to you, you cannot really go. You were thinking, okay, after login only I can go to dashboard because that's where it was showing. But what is happening right now with the URL also you cannot go, right? We have stopped that. So this is one great thing. Now let us log in. I'll log in again using my password. So I'm logged in. Now I should be able to go to dashboard without coming to the login page because I'm logged in. But hold on, there is one more use case, no? I go to all products, I go to a product details, I click on buy it. I want user to log in if they are not logged in. If I click on buy it, now user is logged in, they will go to checkout page. Fair enough. Now I will copy this particular URL, I will log out, and again I will try this URL. What will happen? I'm still going to the checkout page. So that means that particular use case is not satisfied yet. So what can we do to satisfy that use case and why it is working in this fashion? It's working because just now I have written this logic that everything starts with a public URL fragment, which is like /products. You allow it to be a public route. So that means /products/1/checkout is a public route because it starts with /products. Now, if your use case is such that in a path, a portion of the path, you want to make it like publicly accessible, but deep down somewhere, some fragment of the path you want to make as privately accessible, like through login, you can still do that in your middleware. It's just about writing some few lines of code and making it available. Let's do that. What do you say? So for that, you have to let your middleware know what is that protected subroute fragment for which you want to treat that subroute as a protected route. So like other definition, I'm going to create one more over here and I'm telling it as protected subroutes and saying that /checkout is the protected subroute. Okay. Now wherever we have this, we can have other subroutes also if we have. And then in the middleware coming over here itself, you can write an additional logic saying that, okay, this is fine. But along with that, can I do also something? I will put each of these things over here. That's fine. And along with that, I'm going to do an and I'm going to do this. Like I'm saying that if the protected subroute is found in the route, in that case, you don't allow it. But if the protected subroute is not found, in that case, you consider that as a public route. So now I'm not logged in. I'm going to refresh this. Okay, I have to, all right, I have to import protected subroute. So let me import protected subroutes. Yeah, now I'm back. I'll go to the details page. From there, I'll go to buyout. You saw? I'm back to my login. So this is another way that you can actually handle things from middleware. All right. So there are a few other ways that we can protect without middleware also. One of it we have seen in the previous video where we could take the session object into our component itself. There we can identify whether the session object is empty. If so, we can use a redirect API from Next.js directly to redirect to any other stuff. That's fair enough. We are going to see one usage of it, in a bit. But before that, I want to let you know one more thing. While doing this, we have broken something. Okay, what? Now I'm going to click on sign in with Google. Previous implementation. I'm going to check my Gmail. I'm going to give the consent. It didn't happen. The login didn't happen. Now if I do with sign in with GitHub, I authorize this guy. It didn't happen. Why it didn't happen? I'll go to my console. It says this is false. Middleware doesn't consider that as a public route at all. So middleware is saying to log in using /API /auth /callback /GitHub or /Google, you have to log in. But that should not happen. I told that for login, you should not do another login. So it means that we have to allow these two URL as a public routes into our middleware. Okay, so this is how the configuration goes. So middleware is taking all the routes from here. It has this public route, it has this protected subroute. So I'll go to public routes now, and I'm going to add these two over here. One is API auth callback Google, another one is API auth callback GitHub. Now let's try. Now let me try Google. Okay, I go to Google, get this guy, give the consent, coming back. Yes, I'm in. I can see my image also at the top. This is working. Now I log out again. I log in again. I'll do with GitHub the same thing just to make sure it works. So authorize tapaScript is going back, come back to with my GitHub. It worked as well. Isn't that awesome? Great. This is awesome. So we understood everything about middleware. We understood like with few use cases like how you can do protected routing with middleware. So I hope you can make use of it. In our case, the middleware is served the auth through nextauth. In your case, it could be from cookies. You can also access cookies from here, get all the information from your cookies, and do exactly same thing over here. And one more thing I want to clarify, or rather put it here very clearly, like the logic that you write over here, it's based on your business use case. From one product to another product, from one application to another application, this logic is gonna change. I have written this logic in this way because my application demand is this. Your application demand will be something else. You're probably doing the logic completely differently. So middleware is open to the implementation that you want to bring in. Last thing that we're going to see in this video is we have an API route call /API/me that's gonna return me the information about the authenticated user. Now to see the information about the authenticated user means my information. I should be authenticated. Otherwise, my information will be available to everyone, on the web, right? So how do we protect, API routes? We have seen something with the middleware. Now we are going to see without middleware. If you have a database at the back and you want to have a protected API route, how are you going to protect it? Let's see that. So are you enjoying what you are learning? If so, and if you like it, please post a like. And also please comment and let me know what you're liking about this video. And please folks, subscribe. Without you giving support, it's very hard and very, very less motivating to move ahead. Please subscribe, and thank you very much to everyone who subscribed to this channel. Let's move on to our last thing. The last thing is about the API route. Let's say we want to make all our APIs public. Usually that happens. We make all the APIs public. So I have given a /API in my public routes. That's why without any kind of login, I can go to /API/me and I can actually access it. See, hey, that's me. It is what given, right? We have written this API route sometime back, route handler. Now, a route like /API/me API route, you don't want to access publicly. is gonna give you your information. That's why it is called /me. It's gonna give you your email ID, your name, your phone number, everything. And you might want to use it programmatically somewhere inside. Like when you logged in, you want to call /API/me to know what's your DP, to know what's your email ID or what's your name, to kind of put it somewhere, the logged in user's information basically. So you don't want to make this thing public. How do you guard it? So in this kind of situation, what you can do, I'll show it for the API route itself. So this is my API route. Let's code it out. I am going to utilize my auth and session over here. Now, as it is not middleware, I can actually import the auth from auth.js without any problem. I don't have to do like getting the auth config here, then have the next-auth object, and then put the auth config inside next-auth to get the auth. I don't have to do all this circus over here because this is not middleware. Now here, I can get from MongoDB the user's information by email. How? Because I have the auth. Through auth, I can get the session. From session, I can get the email. From email, I can get logged in users, all the information from MongoDB, and I can return. Okay. So for that, I have to do something. In the last video, I had written queries to create user. If you remember, when we did the registration process, we actually did something called create user, and through that we could create a user. Here, let me write one more function called export async function get user by email, and it takes an email ID and it is going to return me the user that's matching this email. Email is unique, right? So const user equals to await user model dot find one, because there's only one user with that email, and then email. User information means all the thing about the user is there in the user collection. You may not want to retrieve and return the password. So you can do something like dot select, and then you can say minus password. So you don't return you the password. And at the end, you are going to say lean. Basically, you don't want Mongo's any meta objects to be returned. That's it. And then you do return user. So this is going to return you a user that is exactly matching the email address that you are passing. Now let's go back to our route, basically the route handler. Over here, I have auth, I have the next response, right, on the route. Along with that, let me do a few things. Let me import this get user by email. Let me also import the DB connect. We are importing this DB connect here because, as we explained in the last video, that sometime it might happen that your customer is accessing your API or trying to access your API without your UI. Now we have instantiated this DB connection to MongoDB in our layout, but if they are accessing your APIs directly without your UI, you still need the connection to MongoDB, isn't it? So that's the reason. Now we have all the required imports. So let's go ahead and code this out so that we can actually establish those, guarded route. So first thing is const get the session await auth. Okay. So from auth, I got the session. Now I'll be checking inside session whether the user information is there or not. If the user information is not available, then I will throw an exception saying that next response saying you are not authenticated. Okay. And here instead of 500, let it be 401. All right. Then if this is fine, now it's time that I will post the DB connection. So I will do await my DB connection. After the DB connection has been done, let me remove this and let me have a try catch. If there is an error happening straight away, I can say some kind of server error and do a return from here of 500. Now, in case there is no error and things are as usual, what I can do, I can now call my this get user by email, right? So I can call await get user by email passing session.user.email, because auth will give me a session, and if the session is having a user, user also will have an email. This I can take it in const user, and finally I can return a response from here, next response, with the status code of 200. It means it is successful. So I'm returning as text response JSON.stringify of this user, and I'm returning status 200. All right. So that's all. This is all about auth/me. I have guarded it with the session.user this control that if I'm not logged in, I'm throwing it like you got to be authenticated. But if you are logged in, then I am getting into my DB I am finding this particular user by email and I'm throwing this user information without the password because that's what I have taken care in get user by email. Let me now try. You are not authenticated. Do you see this? You are not authenticated, very clearly coming. Now let me go and try to log in. Let's log in. Any method, credential provider or Oauth, all will work. Password, I have logged in. Now I'll go over here and I'll refresh. Do you see the information? I have my ID, I have my name, I have my email, I have my role, and this is only available to me because I have authenticated. So this is how you have protected your API route as well. I hope this makes a lot of sense to you. So hey, what do you want to learn next? Let me know. Comment below and tell me like which Next.js topic you want to learn next. I want to prepare a few stuff that, let me tell you, very exciting. And this is why I feel that you should stay connected to tapaScript. You should subscribe to tapaScript. You should put the watch or the bell button on so that you get all the notifications. I want to build some project using Next.js. How about that? How about getting Shatsy and Next.js, some database stuff at the back end, and try to create some projects which are like some cool stuff, like some real life projects that we can actually create together, right? Those will be kind of bigger multi-part videos, but at the end of it, you will learn something from the scratch till the project building, which is like production ready. How about that? Because all those underlying things like how to do the authentication, how to do this middleware stuff, how to organize your pages, how to do dynamic routing, how to do parallel routing, we have done this, right? How to do intercepting routes, everything we have learned in the bits and pieces. Now, if we start doing project building, we can utilize all those knowledge into project and start doing something awesome. Do you think it's the right idea? Post a comment below. I want to know like what you think about it, and if I get good response, why not? I'm going to do that. Stay well, keep learning, and take care of yourself. Thank you.